So even though we might not be completely immune to every single version of HMPV, those past encounters are still shaping how our bodies respond and giving us an advantage in the fight.
Exactly. Think of it like having a baseline level of fitness. Even if you're not training for a specific marathon, that baseline fitness makes it easier to adapt and train for new challenges. It's the same idea with our immune systems.
That's a really good analogy. It reminds us that building a strong and adaptable immune system is an ongoing process, not just a one-time thing. And it seems like our interactions with viruses like HMPV, even the ones that make us feel yucky, are a big part of that process.
Absolutely. It's
Hmm.
all part of this intricate dance between our bodies and the world of microbes all around us.
Oh, I'm definitely feeling a newfound appreciation for my immune system and all the hard work it's doing behind the scenes to keep me healthy. But before we get too lost in the microscopic world, I want to bring us back to the big picture for a minute. We've talked about how HMPV spreads the immune response and this whole idea of pre-existing immunity. But what does all of this mean for us in practical terms? How should we use this knowledge to navigate this HMPV season and beyond?
That's the key question. And it leads us to think about both public health strategies and individual choices. The fact that HMPV isn't a new threat, that it follows seasonal patterns and that most of us have some level of immunity, should all factor into how we approach prevention and management.
So it's about making smart decisions based on a realistic understanding of the risks.
Exactly. We should definitely take sensible precautions, especially during times when these viruses are more common. But we shouldn't let fear or anxiety take over our lives.
I hear you. It's about finding that balance between being cautious and recognizing that viruses are just a part of life.
Right, and that brings us back to those simple but effective things we talked about before. Washing our hands, frequently covering our coughs and sneezes, staying home when we're sick. Those actions protect us individually, but they also help to slow down the spread of the virus in our communities, which protects those who are more vulnerable. It's a shared responsibility.
For sure. It reminds us that we're all in this together and that what we do can have a ripple effect that impacts more than just ourselves. But beyond those basic things, are there any other steps we can take to boost our immune systems and make ourselves more resilient to viruses like HMPV?
That's a great question. And this is where individual choices can really make a difference. There's no magic bullet, of course, but taking a holistic approach to health can go a long way in supporting your immune system's ability to do its job.
So things like getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, managing stress, all that good stuff.
Exactly. Those lifestyle factors might seem basic, but they're actually crucial for keeping your immune system running smoothly. Think of it this way. Your immune system is like a complex machine that needs the right fuel and regular maintenance to function at its best.
Okay, so it's not just about fighting off viruses when they attack. It's about creating an environment inside our bodies that supports a strong and healthy immune system.
Exactly. It's about giving your body the tools it needs to defend itself effectively.
I love that perspective. It's about taking an active role in our health instead of just waiting for something to go wrong. Okay, we've covered a lot in this section. How HMPV spreads, how our immune system fights back, practical strategies for prevention, and how to support our immune systems. But before we wrap up part two of our HMPV deep dive, I want to touch on one more interesting aspect of this virus. We mentioned earlier that there's no specific vaccine for HMPV yet, but with all this talk about pre-existing immunity and how exposure can actually be beneficial, I'm wondering if that could change the game when it comes to developing a vaccine.
That's a really thought-provoking question. And it's something that researchers are definitely exploring. The fact that most people already have some level of immunity to HMPV could actually offer some valuable clues for vaccine development.
So instead of starting from scratch, scientists could potentially build on that existing immunity.
Exactly. One approach could be to develop a booster vaccine that targets the parts of the virus that tend to mutate most frequently. So basically, we'd be updating our immune system's library with the latest information.
That's so cool. It's like we're taking advantage of what our immune system already knows and fine-tuning it to keep up with how the virus is changing.
Exactly. It's like giving your immune system a refresher course.
Love that analogy. It makes the whole idea of vaccine development seem much less complicated. But are there any challenges or roadblocks that scientists might face in developing an HMPV vaccine?
Well, one challenge is that HMPZ, like many respiratory viruses, is a bit of a shapeshifter. It can mutate and change over time, which makes it tough to create a vaccine that provides long-lasting protection against every single strain.
So it's that cat and mouse game again, with the virus trying to stay one step ahead.
You got it.
Yeah.
But scientists are getting better and better at understanding how viruses evolve, and they're developing new strategies to create more adaptable vaccines. One promising approach is to target the parts of the virus that don't change as much. Basically, they're going after the virus's weak spots.
That's clever, trying to outsmart the virus by targeting its Achilles heel.
Exactly. Another challenge is that HMPV can be tricky to grow in the lab, which makes it harder to study and develop vaccines. But researchers are working on new techniques to overcome these hurdles.
So it sounds like there's a lot of exciting research and innovation happening in the world of HMPV vaccine development. I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Me too. It's a constantly changing and rapidly evolving field. And I'm optimistic that we'll see some major breakthroughs in the next few years.
Well, this has been an amazing journey into the world of HMPV. We've explored how it spreads, how our immune system responds, practical tips for prevention, and the latest in vaccine research. It's been fascinating to learn how our past experiences with this virus are shaping our immune systems and influencing how we approach public health. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to one of the most thought-provoking ideas we've discussed. This idea that being exposed to common viruses like HMPV could actually be a good thing in the long run. Maybe it even helps us build stronger, more adaptable immune systems. I'm curious to explore this a little further. Is it possible that our modern obsession with being super clean and avoiding germs at all costs could actually be doing more harm than good? Could this be contributing to the rise in allergies and autoimmune diseases like some researchers are suggesting?
That's a really interesting question. And it's definitely something that's being debated in the scientific community. The hygiene hypothesis, as it's called, suggests that our modern super clean lifestyles might actually be preventing our immune systems from getting the training and exposure they need to develop properly.
So it's like our immune systems are getting a little bit bored and lazy without enough challenges to keep them busy.
That's a good way to think about it. The idea is that our immune systems evolved in a world that was full of microbes. And being exposed to those microbes, especially early in life, is crucial for teaching the immune system how to tell the difference between stuff that's harmless and stuff that's dangerous.
So by trying to eliminate all germs from our lives, we might actually be messing with that crucial learning process.
That's the hypothesis. And there's growing evidence to support it. Studies have shown that kids who grow up in environments with more exposure to microbes, like farms or homes with pets, tend to have fewer allergies and autoimmune problems.
Wow, so a little dirt might actually be good for us. But how does this all connect to HMPV specifically?
Well, HMPV is one of those common respiratory viruses that most people get exposed to when they're young. So it could be playing a role in this immune system training process. By giving our immune systems exposure to a variety of harmless microbes, including HMPV, we might be helping to create a more balanced and tolerant immune response.
So even though HMPV might cause a few sniffles and coughs, it could actually be helping us stay healthier in the long run by teaching our immune systems how to react properly to all sorts of challenges.
That's the idea. It's a good reminder that our relationship with microbes is complicated, and not all microbes are bad. Some of them might actually be helping us out by shaping our immune systems and keeping us healthy.
This is seriously blowing my mind. It totally changes how I think about germs and hygiene. Okay, I think this is a good place to take a break. We've covered a lot in this deep dive into HMPV, and I bet our listeners have a lot to think about. When we come back for the final part of this episode, let's put it all together, answer any lingering questions, and explore what all this means for dealing with respiratory viruses in the future. Stay with us.
And we're back for the final part of our HMPV deep dive. Feels like we've been on this incredible journey through the microscopic world, exploring how this common virus and our immune systems interact.
It really has been quite the exploration, hasn't it? From all that pandemic panic to figuring out how immunity works, we've covered a ton of ground.
We really have. So for this last part, let's try to tie it all together. What are the big takeaways our listeners should remember about HMPV?
Well, the most important thing is that HMPV isn't some brand new virus. It's been around for ages, and most of us have probably had it several times, which means we've built up some immunity to it. Right. And that existing immunity makes a major outbreak much less likely, even with the recent surge in cases.
Exactly. And that increase in HMPV activity is probably just because of the time of year, like what we see with other respiratory viruses, like the flu.
And even though HMPV can cause more serious problems for little kids, older folks, and people with weakened immune systems, most healthy people will just have mild cold-like symptoms and get better without any complications.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But even those mild cases are doing something important. They're helping to shape our immune systems, which can make us more resilient to other respiratory viruses, too.
That's what's so cool about this whole deep dive. It's not just about understanding HMPV on its own. It's about seeing how it fits into the bigger picture of how our immune system develops and all the complex ways our bodies interact with the world of microbes around us.
It's like we zoomed in on this one tiny piece of a giant puzzle. And by doing that, we've gained a better understanding of how all those pieces fit together and influence each other.
Exactly. And that leads me to a question that's been on my mind this whole time. If having these common viruses like HMPV is actually good for our immune systems, does that mean our modern obsession with cleanliness and avoiding germs could actually be backfiring? Could it be contributing to things like allergies and autoimmune disorders, like some researchers are saying?
That's a really interesting question,
Yeah.
and it's something that scientists are still trying to figure out. The hygiene hypothesis, as it's called, suggests that our super clean lifestyles might actually be depriving our immune systems of the training they need to develop properly.
So it's like our immune systems are getting a little too comfy, a little too sheltered, and maybe they're not as prepared to handle real threats when they do show up.
That's a good way to put it. It's like a muscle that gets weaker if you don't use it. The idea is that by reducing our exposure to a bunch of different microbes, even the harmless ones, we might actually be making ourselves more vulnerable to allergies, autoimmune problems, and even some infectious diseases.
Wow, that's pretty intense. It suggests that all our efforts to control our environment could be having some unintended consequences for our health.
It definitely shows that we need a more balanced understanding of how we relate to microbes. It's not about living in a sterile bubble. It's about finding that sweet spot between practicing good hygiene and giving our immune systems a chance to learn and adapt.
It's like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Obviously, we don't want to go around purposely exposing ourselves to dangerous germs, but maybe a little dirt and a few sniffles here and there aren't so bad after all.
Right. It's about accepting that life is messy and remembering that our immune systems evolved to deal with a world full of microbes.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. We've learned so much about HMPV, how it affects our immune systems, and the bigger questions it raises about how we think about health and hygiene. But before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. If it's true that our immune systems benefit from encountering a bunch of different microbes, what does that mean for how we handle respiratory viruses in the future?
That's a great question to think about as we move forward. It suggests that we might need to change how we approach dealing with these viruses. Instead of just trying to get rid of them completely, maybe we should think about strategies that promote a balance between exposure and protection. That could involve reevaluating our hygiene practices, exploring new vaccine strategies that take advantage of pre-existing immunity, and encouraging a more holistic approach to health that supports strong immune systems.
It's a good reminder that the world of viruses and immunity is constantly changing, and we need to keep up.
Exactly. We have to stay curious, informed, and open to new ideas.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this HMPV deep dive. We hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little empowering. Remember, knowledge is power, and a healthy dose of curiosity can help you be healthier and more resilient.